This is draft season presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Giants. Decode risk, unlock opportunity. Learn more on Moody's.com. Hello, everybody. John Schmeelk, Tony Pauline with you. Hope you guys are doing well as we get ready for the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl. Tony, how you doing, man?
Okay, up late last night watching the game. Although, I mean, you kind of knew early on which way the game was going to end, or who the victor of the game was going to be. I think Ohio State kept Notre Dame in that game a little bit longer than they should have been, but it was it's what we expected, and we'll talk about the game. And like you, leaving for Shrine Bowl practices this coming Friday.
Absolutely. And Tony, of course, you can find all of Tony's work at sportskita.com. Check it out. Yeah, and this is what we'll do today, folks. We're going to do the review of the national championship game. A lot of these guys we've talked about already, so we don't want to spend too much time on that. It's going to be a little repetitive from prior shows. We're going to talk about some of the undergrads that are heading into both Shrine and Senior Bowl. Then we're going to do our Shrine preview today. And then next Monday, that's the day Tony and I are both traveling from Frisco to Mobile. Then our Senior Bowl preview is going to land. The video will just be Senior Bowl preview, but then the audio is going to include our reaction to the 2 days of Shrine Bowl practice as well. We'll probably record that at some point on Sunday afternoon, is my guess. So stay tuned to all of that. That's what's coming your way on draft season. Really busy time of year. We can't wait to get down there and lay eyes on these guys in person and see what they can do. All right, Tony, so let's get to it. National championship game last night. You made it, I never really thought that game was in doubt. There was never any question that frankly, Notre Dame's defense was going to be able to slow down Ohio State's offense in that game. And I think you just saw the difference in talent, quite frankly, between the two teams.
I think the only thing that slowed down the Ohio State offense was Ohio State and some of the play calling. I mean, they kept running Will Howard on quarterback sneaks when you had Quinshawn Junkins back there, who had a terrific game.
He was
It's great
great.
the way both he and Trayvon Henderson, who had a big run early in the game, play off of each other. But I think from a scouting perspective, you have to like what you saw from both of the quarterbacks. First, you start with Riley Leonard. I mean, that first drive, a 9-minute drive, they used the run to set up the pass, and the runs were from Riley Leonard. And then even late in the game, when you thought there's no way Notre Dame's going to come back, bad interference call, a penalty on David Igbinosun, who's had a ton of them this year. Riley Leonard keeps Notre Dame in the game. I don't think he played masterfully, but I think that's what is going to elevate him into the second day of the draft. I said it last week. We'll see what happens if he plays in the Senior Bowl. He's scheduled, but if he's banged up, he may not show up. But I think when you look at the athleticism, the arm strength, and just the leadership intangibles, because he was that offense last night because the offensive line was banged up, the running game was banged up, and it was all on his shoulders. And he performed relatively well. And he's got the upside because he's got the athleticism. So, you go back to our talk with Jim Nagy when we had Jim on about a month ago to preview the Senior Bowl. And Jim agreed that, Riley Leonard, if he's not the fastest rising quarterback, is one of the two players at the position that is rising faster than anybody else.
No, I'm with you 100%. And I thought both Ohio State running backs, and Tony, you kind of mentioned in your first answer, Junkins showed that kind of the quickness between the tackles. Henderson showed off the speed. Your thoughts on those two guys? And out of curiosity, which one do you think goes first on draft weekend?
I like Trayvon Henderson because he does so many things well, because he's such an exceptional pass catcher out of the backfield. He's such a big play threat. Depends on what you're looking for. I think Henderson is more what the NFL wants in a running back today. But if you are in that late second, early third round area, and you want that feature runner, you're looking for that guy that could potentially be your quote unquote number one running back, you're going to look towards Junkins. If you want the guy that, you're going to rotate in and out of the lineup, third down specialist, put him on first down, throw the ball to him out of the backfield, you're going to go towards Trayvon Henderson. Now, Henderson does have a lot of injuries, which are going to have to be checked out through the combine process. I think it's what you're looking for. I lean towards Henderson, although I understand the love towards Judkins.
Absolutely. And there's one other guy in Ohio State that I want to mention. JT Tuimoloau, I thought during these 4 playoff games, Tony, and we talked about him during the year, and again, solid player, didn't really bump his stock at all, probably solid, second round type of player. Maybe in this draft, they'll sneak into the back end of the first. But in his 4 playoff games, 20 pressures, 10 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, good against the run. He really put an exclamation point, I think, on his season with the way he played through these college football playoffs.
Very athletic. And I think why I'm disappointed in him is because I saw the film last year and I expected more from him during the regular season. I mean, he's not just a pin your ears type of guy and rush up the field defensive end. He makes plays out into space. He'll get down the line of scrimmage and make plays against the run. Obviously, he's always been known as a good pass rusher. So I think what's going to happen, go back to the combine, when you have those combine interviews, they're going to say to him, well, why didn't you play the whole season like you played during the 4 games of the playoffs? What went on there? I'm also going to say, mention my guy, Tyleek Williams. I think Tuimoloau and even Sawyer, to an extent, had success because Tyleek Williams was consistently commanding double teams in the middle of the line. He was consistently getting pressure. He was consistently forcing the quarterback to move around, which I think made Tuimoloau's and Sawyer's life a little bit easier, jobs a little bit easier. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, Tuimoloau, Sawyer, and Tyleek Williams have all really upped their game in the 4-game play or the 4 games they played during the CFP playoffs.
All right, anything else jump out at you from this game or just the final football we're going to see, Tony, in terms of real college football this year that you want to get out there before we jump over to the underclassmen?
Will Howard's another interesting one. Played incredibly well yesterday, made a couple of big-time passes. We'll get more. I'll get into him more when we get to the Senior Bowl, but he's got the arm. He's got the physical skills. Doesn't really move his head from the primary receiver quick enough, which is a concern. I talked about how in the game against Texas, he made a lot of dangerous throws in the Cotton Bowl. You didn't see that yesterday. I mean, he made some really outstanding throws. And it's going to be interesting because, like Riley Leonard, he's a big guy with a next level arm who can make all the throws. And somebody may fall in love with him and take him early in the draft because you're going to say, hey, this guy's got all the physical tools. We're going to teach him to be a quarterback.
All right, let's get to the underclassmen. And we've really kind of had a large number of these guys, Tony, jump in now for both Shrine and Senior Bowl. Last year, it was in effect, but it came in a little bit later. Guys weren't as ready to do it. This year, I think really the floodgates have opened in a good way. And we should just note for fans, Tony and I are recording this on Monday. So things can change between now and when Shrine and Senior begin next week. Guys, they find out they have injuries. They can't go. They change their minds, all that stuff. The guys in the national championship game, they have decisions to make still in terms of what they want to do. So a lot of these things can change, but we're operating on terms of what we know in terms of 1:15 on Monday here with how these games would go. So let's start here, Tony. I'm going to go a little bit of a different format with you. Give me your top 5 underclassmen you're most excited to see in these 2 All-Star games, and then we can break them down to more specificity.
Well, I got to look at my list. I mean, obviously, the receiver from Stanford, Ella Mayor, A.O. Manor, who everybody seems to love. I want to see how complete his game is. Marcus Embo of Purdue, who I think could definitely go in the first round. Likewise, Emory Jones, the offensive tackle from LSU, who I think coming into the season was expected to be a potential early first-round choice. Some scouts had him graded as high as Will Campbell, has not played well this year. Josh Connolly, a guy that I've fawned over literally all season long, the left tackle from Oregon. Is he a tackle? Is he his own blocking guard? Jalen Milroe, of course, who was announced for the Senior Bowl. I mean, that's been my guy. And I think when we get into our Senior Bowl preview, talk about how, what an opportunity it is for him. I think Kenneth Grant playing in the Shrine Bowl. That's, he's playing in the Shrine Bowl, which is kind of, interesting, exciting, but it's a situation where he best dominate.
Absolutely. All right, Tony. So we could dig into those guys a little bit more if you want, or you could go position by position, or just what kind of caught your eye about all these underclassmen coming out?
No surprises. I mean, when I went to my list, you may have three seniors go top 25. Cam Ward of Miami of Florida. Tyleek Williams of Ohio State. Shannon Revell, depending on how his medicals come back. Otherwise, it's going to be an underclassmen heavy draft, as it usually is, because what happens is the underclassmen come out and that dissipates, that dilutes the senior class. I thought that Trevor Etienne entering the draft, that kind of caught me by surprise. You and I both liked him a lot coming into the season. He did not have the season as expected. Suspension early on, some injuries. He seemed to be a part-time player most of the year, most of the season in that Georgia offense, rather than really picking up the ball and carrying it per se, especially with all the problems Carson Beck had. Was a little bit surprised by that. And as we spoke about, I think Drew Lahr made the right decision by staying in rather than entering the draft.
Yeah, and we talked about Quinn Ewers, I believe, last week. So that's one of the underclassmen that we talked about. So, all right, those are the most of the underclassmen, folks. And again, we'll talk more about these guys in detail. Most of those guys we talked about are Senior Bowl players. So we'll talk about most of those guys in detail when we get to our Senior Bowl preview next Monday. Let's get to the Shrine Bowl, Tony. But there are some big players here, too. And you mentioned one, and Kenneth Grant. We'll get to him when we get to the defensive tackles. But obviously, all eyes are going to be on the quarterback position. Shedeur Sanders is going to be there. There's no been an official announcement in terms of what he's going to do. The rumors on the internet, he's just going to throw in on-on-ones. He's not going to do any competitive team stuff. That would be too bad. We'll have to wait and see what he does when we get there. But him, Kyle McCord, and there's a couple other guys you like too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's going to be a huge crowd there around Shedeur Sanders, and I hope he does a lot. I mean, I hope he really participates. Kyle McCord, we've talked about him. You know, I mentioned Riley Leonard as being, if not the fastest riser at the quarterback position, one of the two fastest risers at that spot. The other one would be Kyle McCord, who transferred from Ohio State to Syracuse, had a terrific season at Syracuse. He's got a big-time arm. I'm sure we're both going to sit there and be wowed by the throws that he can make, the speed he gets on passes. He can thread a needle. He can be a little bit inaccurate at times. His passes do get away from him. He also has that Will Howard disease, probably even worse, that he stares down the primary target a lot. He really is slow to move his head off his number one receiver. So when they go into scrimmages, we'll be looking at that. And then Cam Miller, the quarterback from North Dakota State, a little bit smaller, 6'1", maybe not even 210 pounds, but a real productive passer who's got a decent arm, throws some nice balls down the field. You know, in those one-on-ones with Cam Miller, you want to see if he gets those long passes downfield with speed, or the ball's dying and the receivers have to slow up and wait for the pass to get to him.
No question about it. All right, let's jump to the running back position here, Tony. A couple of guys in terms, one that we talked about even going back to last year's draft season in Raheem Rocket Sanders.
Bigger back, but he's got some quickness to change the scenery from Arkansas to South Carolina. Worked really well for him this season. Big, productive, basically run you over type of ball carrier who's got some excellent short area quickness. When we're watching him in drill specifically, is he stiff? Is he mobile? Is he able to, reach back and make the receptions? You want to see his pass-catching hands because he was never featured in that area. He's got to show that he's more than a one-dimensional downhill ball carrier.
No question about it. Anybody else at the running back position that has you excited?
Yeah, Corey Kiner of Cincinnati. Keep an eye on him. He's a bigger back, but he's also got excellent quickness. He's got some creativity. He's got a burst in his game. I think Kiner's a guy. This is a good situation for him where if he has a good showing, it'll help his draft stock.
Now let's talk about the pass catchers, Tony. And it's an odd year where there might be more excitement over the tight end class than the wide receiver class. Spare maybe a couple guys at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not going to see any of the guys at the top of the Shrine Bowl, but we're going to see some real good ones. I mean, you start with Oronde Gadsden of Syracuse, who is he a big possession receiver? Is he a move tight end? He can catch the ball, Gadsden. So you want to see what he weighs in at. Is he 230 pounds or more? What is his playing speed like? Has those bloodlines. His father was a receiver for the Miami Dolphins for all those years, and he catches the ball extremely well. He's not a blocker. They never really asked him to block at Syracuse, but they threw him the ball, and he did a terrific job. And remember, I believe he played 2 games in 2023 before suffering a season-ending injury, and he's come back quite well. Speaking of injuries, Luke Lachey of Iowa is going to be at the Shrine Bowl. And here was a guy who, after Laporta left Iowa, everyone said that Lachey is going to be the next big-time tight end out of Iowa, suffered an injury, has seemed to struggle to get it back, to get back to where he was before he went down. The quickness, the speed, he's a real good pass catcher, but can he separate? Also, Carter Runyon of Townsend. Carter Runyon is sort of in the Oronde Gadsden mold, but he's a little bit bigger. And, like Gadsden, Carter Runyon was a receiver at Townsend before making the move to tight end this year, and he's a real good pass catcher. With him, you want to see how he does in the blocking drills. Does he hold up? Does he show any strength? He can catch the ball He's not bad at getting down the field either. But a small school guy from Towson's got to show that he's got a complete game if he's going to be selected late in the draft.
All right, how about the wide receivers, Tony?
Ja'Cory Brooks, the former Alabama transfer, played at Louisville, deceptively fast. I think he's got an underrated game. I think this is a guy who's got a chance to get into the late part of day two. Not a super speedster, but it's got enough speed to get it downfield and beat defenders in a foot race. 6'1", just about 200 pounds, catches the ball very well. Nick Nash, we talked about him when Eric was on the show. 104 receptions, 1,382 yards, 16 TDs, a natural pass catcher, coming off a phenomenal season. The question with him is speed and quickness. How quick does he get off the line? Is he a quick route runner? Does he have a burst to separate? Or is he just a guy that catches the ball very well? If he can put that all together, Nash, who was basically graded as a street free agent coming into the season, could find himself in the late rounds. And then finally, Ricky White of UNLV, former Michigan State receiver. That UNLV program had a terrific campaign this year. White was one of the leaders on offense. Sort of like got decent speed for a possession receiver, but he doesn't have great size. But again, a real good pass catcher who late in the draft, 6th, 7th round, if you're looking for your number 4, number 5 receiver, White could be that guy if he shows well at the Shrine Bowl.
Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risks into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at Moody's.com. All right, Tony, let's go up front. The big men on the offensive line. You have a quartet of guys that you're excited to see.
Yeah, contrasting styles in the first two guys. Nash Jones, who was someone we spoke about with Eric. Here's a guy who wasn't on the scouting radar before the season. Now everyone's talking about him as a late day 3 pick. I mean, if you're looking for a power gap blocker, that's Nash Jones. I think the one thing that's going to stand out about him in the early part of Shrine practice is just the build. He's got an NFL lineman's build. Big, thick lower body, powerful. You're not going to ask him to move too much to the left or right or get on the second level. But if you want, a pile driver as a run blocker, he's your guy. Opposite of that is Luke Newman. Holy Cross transfer, played Michigan State. Like his teammate last year at Holy Cross, who was taken in the 6th round. Very athletic, very mobile, zone blocking guy. Want to see how he holds up in those one-on-ones. And then during the scrimmage, if they use him pulling across the line of scrimmage, watch his athleticism. Esa Pohl at Washington State, a guy who was graded as a street free agent coming into the season by scouts. I like this game. He's a bigger guy. He's strong. He's mobile. Glad that he's getting the credit that he deserves. And then Joshua Gray of Oregon State. Joshua Gray, coming into the 2023 season, was graded higher by scouts than Talise Fuega. It's just that Fuega had a phenomenal 2023, ended up and went into the draft, was a mid-first round pick by the New Orleans Saints. Joshua Gray went back for another year at Oregon State. Played tackle at Oregon State, was used at guard this year. Some people project him at center. So with Gray, want to see how he does at the center spot. Can he snap? Is he snapping efficiently? Because the center class this year does not look good at all.
As we dig into this draft, Tony, over the next couple of months, I think people will find that it's the defensive line / edge class that is really the strongest part of the draft class. There's a lot of really good players, and it's so deep. And my goodness, just to look ahead to the Senior Bowl preview next week, I think on the Senior Bowl preview, you had around 8 guys listed on your list you wanted to talk about. I had an additional 5. So that's like a dozen guys, and there's good players here. And you mentioned Kenneth Grant earlier at Shrine as well that are going to get drafted.
Very excited watching the defensive lineman edge rushers at the Shrine Bowl. Talked about Kenneth Grant, and we've talked about him all season long. Everyone talks about Mason Graham, who is a real safe pick, is going to be a very early selection. Kenneth Grant probably has more upside than Mason Graham because of the size, because of the athleticism. He can be a one-man wrecking crew. This is a major get for the Shrine Bowl. Want to see Grant go out there, and basically he has to dominate. He has to dominate at this game. And if he does, he's going to be a mid-first round choice. Jordan Phillips of Maryland is a guy who I spoke about before. 3rd-year sophomore. I think he's very underrated. More of your natural zero technique, nose tackle type of prospect, does the dirty work on the inside, collects double team blocks, which allows his teammates on the outside to make plays on the ball. I think he's a bit more athletic than given credit for, but it's going to be enjoyable to watch him in those one-on-ones. Are they able to move him off the ball? Does he consistently bull rush players into the backfield? Fadil Diggs of Syracuse. I don't know why this guy doesn't get more credit. Texas, he transferred over from Texas A&M. You watch the Syracuse film, you can't help but not notice number 10. He's all over the place making plays out of a three-point stance, standing over tackle, athleticism, speed, not just a pass rusher, but someone who will get out out to the flanks, out to the sidelines in pursuit and run down ball carriers from the backside. So this guy can do a lot of different things. I expect him to test very well. I think he's going to be terror Shrine Bowl practices. Ahmad Hassanian of Boise State spoke about him when the college football playoffs started. Real good pass rusher coming out of Boise State. Goes about 6'3", 270 pounds, more of your defensive end in a conventional four-man line, but he can get up the field and make a lot of plays. Small school guy, Elijah Ponder out of Cal Poly. Again, sort of like Fadil Diggs in the sense that he can stand over tackle, he can come out of a three-point stance, was a terror of a pass rusher on the 1AA FCS level, very athletic, can also be used off the line of scrimmage. And then finally, Joe Evans of Texas San Antonio, 6'2.5", 342 pounds. I believe he's a transfer from LSU. He's a guy who looks like a mountain of a man. He's a guy who shows brilliance and dominance in spurts, but he never really does it on a consistent basis. And I think scouts are a little bit disappointed with him. He's going to have to do it here. He's going to have to answer some questions as to why he wasn't as dominant as scouts thought. But he's got the body type to be a natural nose tackle, and he's not a bad athlete either.
You know, every year I feel like we come into these drafts, Tony, and we're like, the off-ball linebacker class is just not great.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a really tough position in college to develop given the schemes. But what do you think about this group at Shrine?
Yeah, Carson Bruner of Washington. I mean, if you watch Washington football the last 3 years, another guy you can't help but not notice. He plays like his hair's on fire. He's explosive up the field. He's great sideline to sideline, covers a lot of area, outstanding in pursuit, also has some cover skills. So I think right now you're looking at a mid-day 3 pick. You know, with these off-the-ball linebackers especially, what you want to see is how they do in the cover drills, in those one-on-one cover drills against the tight ends, against the running backs. Can they flip their hips? Can they run downfield with these guys? Do they have ball skills? You know, do they get their head back around? Bruner has all the underlying skills to be able to do that. He just has to show as much during Shrine Bowl practices. Jamon Dumas-Johnson, former Georgia linebacker who transferred to Kentucky, more of your traditional strong side linebacker, not that great in coverage, not bad in coverage, just not great in coverage, but a real tough, punching him out type of linebacker, stout against the run, forces the action up the field. And someone we spoke about earlier, Aaron Smith out of South Carolina State, smaller pursuit guy, sideline to sideline. Maybe he measures in at 6 feet, 225 pounds, but he plays bigger, doesn't back down to a challenge. A real fun guy to watch. I think he's got potential as a late round pick, special teams guy.
All right, Tony, let's go to the defensive backs that'll be covering some of those pass catches we talked about.
Start with R.J. Mickens, the safety from Clemson. Here's a guy who just makes play after play against the pass, against the run at Clemson. He's not the fastest guy in the world. Scouts are estimating he's a 4.55 guy, but he's got it going on between the ears, and he doesn't have mental lapses, and he covers a lot of area in the field, does a great job working with his cornerbacks. You know, like those off-ball linebackers, a safety like R.J. Mickens, when they do those one-on-one pass catching drills with the receivers, he's got to show some ball skills. He's got to show that he can flip his hips in transition, run downfield with the opponents, with the opposing receivers, get his head back around, follow them out of their breaks. He's very good facing the action. But now when they do those and he did a decent job when the few times they placed him over the slot receiver. Now he's got to show it during practice. Glendon Miller, another Maryland kid, was great as a low-level free agent coming into the season. Primarily played nickel back at Maryland, was never really a primary cover corner, but he's got great ball skills, very feisty, very, very physical. Here's an opportunity, again, in those one-on-ones to show he's got the ball skills to play on the outside on a consistent basis. And Justin Wally out of Minnesota, a big physical corner with terrific ball skills, constantly making plays against the pass, shows the ability to stay with receivers out of their breaks, on their hip. You know, not a guy that gets called for a lot of pass interference penalties, but a guy that's got really good ball skills.
All right, Tony, just closing thoughts on Shrine before we wrap things up, or if there's anything else you have going on at Sportskeeda that you want fans to keep an eye on.
Well, obviously, Shrine. The one good thing about Shrine and Senior Bowl week is it's the first time that the scouting community and the teams get together as a group. So there's always a lot of rumors and buzz out there, and I'm sure we're going to be we'll have it at Sportskeeda. I know we will have it at Sportskeeda every day during Shrine Bowl practices, as well as a breakdown of how the players have looked.
So, Tony, you're telling me scouts get together at bars, get buzzed, which then creates buzz with people like you, is basically what you're telling me.
Well, I don't hang out at bars too much, but yeah, I mean something like that.
And we will be there to cover it right here on draft season as well. Again, Tony and I will be heading out on Friday. First practice is Saturday and Sunday. I'll be there for that. I think, Tony, you're sticking around for most of Monday's practice too, correct? Before you go to Mobile or no?
Yeah, I'm sticking around. I mean, unless something happens, the intention is to be at both practices on Monday, then bus down to Dallas Fort, whatever DFW airport, and get on a plane and fly over to Mobile.
Yes, and then I will be at Mobile. I'll be flying out Monday morning. I'll be in Mobile. We'll set up all our stuff, and then we'll have coverage of the Senior Bowl all week, coming back on Thursday night. So that'll be fun. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this edition of Draft Season. Again, brought to you by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Football Giants. For Tony Pauline, I'm John Schmeelk. You can subscribe to Draft Season on your favorite podcast platform, or watch us on the Giants YouTube channel, or go to the Giants app, giants.com/podcast. A bunch of ways to find us. Thanks for being with us, everybody. Enjoy your week. Try to stay warm out there, and we'll see you next time.